I would now like to welcome Canada's Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, Amarjeet Sohi. Canada is also currently focused on modernizing its infrastructure. Their approach involves the creation of an infrastructure bank to fund large-scale projects. We look forward to hearing more about the Canadian experience in the infrastructure arena. And for that, I'm going to hit it over to Bob again.
Minister, thanks so much. Can I choose it right here? Yeah. My first question is
Can I sit down first?
Absolutely. I like to maximize all the time I can. Can you just give kind of a brief compare and contrast Canada, United States, and maybe some of the areas where the United States could learn from Canada?
Oh, first of all, I feel so honored to be here. All these spotlights remind me of my days when I was young and I had more hair, and I was used to perform on stage in theater. So it kind of reminds me of my old days. It is absolutely essential for us to understand how integrated the American economy is with the Canadian economy, and how much we share with each other on the economic and on the cultural and on the relationship end. We have families on both sides of the border. I have families in Washington, in Seattle, in California. On the infrastructure file, I think we have common that both of our countries have made a significant commitment to invest in infrastructure, because I think we both understand how critical infrastructure is to grow our economy, create jobs for the middle class, and sustain that economic growth. So our commitment, your commitment is $1 trillion that President Trump has made. Our commitment is to double the infrastructure investments that we are making. It may sound small number, $180 billion, but that's the federal commitment. When you look at the provincial municipal commitment, we are talking about close to $800 billion over next decade, and we are the 1/10 of the population of your country. So it's a significant amount of commitment. I think that's where the commonalities are between both our countries, understanding the importance of infrastructure and also making a commitment to deliver that infrastructure.
And how often are you in contact with policymakers like Chairman Schuster, and because it's so integrated, to work on this legislation to help it pass?
Well, the last time we came here was in June of last year. We had good discussions with your transportation department. Now we're here to engage again with the new administration, and we're looking forward to learning what your plans are. But also, I think we have something we can share with your administration on what our successes has been in Canada and how we rolled out our plan. It's a recent plan. We just got into power in 2015, end of 2015, and we rolled our plan in a very successful way, which is having impact now, creating jobs for the Canadians.
And as far as the politics of in Canada compared to the United States, I mean, here there's been as I mentioned earlier, the stimulus package that President Obama pushed through was not supported by Republicans by and large. And it has become, it kind of poisoned the well, whoever you blame. It's because of the investment and concern about the deficit. What are the politics in Canada regarding investing in transportation?
As your previous guest was mentioning, infrastructure is something that touches on people's lives on a daily basis. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're liberal or conservative or NDPer, if you're stuck in the same traffic, it doesn't really matter. Right? If you're breathing the same air, it doesn't really matter which party you belong to. We believe that we have a broad support from Canadians on all political affiliations to build the infrastructure that is necessary. And we believe that this is the right time to build that infrastructure when our economy is struggling, when we have the historical low interest rates, right? And Canadians are looking for jobs, and Canadian companies are looking for opportunities. So we believe, and we have a support from, this politics is will always remain politics, but I think we have a broad support of Canadians to do so. Another thing that we did related to stimulus, the role that infrastructure can play to stimulate the economy, we designed our plan in 2 stages. We took a 2-phased approach, immediately investing in infrastructure while we are putting emphasis on developing a long-term plan. I am from municipal background. I served on city council for 3 terms. One thing that I have learned is that when you have a federal government that is more hoc planning and doesn't have a long-term vision for what infrastructure should look like and how do we need to support local governments in their decision making. So one thing that we are doing, stage 1, immediate investments into rehabilitation of the existing infrastructure to recapitalize the existing infrastructure, whether it's replacing train tracks or refurbishment of water systems and wastewater systems or refurbishment of affordable housing. While doing that and taking our time to plan that long term and give that consistent, stable, and predictable funding to our partners. And I think infrastructure is about long-term. It is not just about stimulating your economy in the short term. Because if you focus on stimulation, I think then you lose the big picture.
One of the big things that separates the party is in the United States is the role of the federal government in transportation. And Chairman Schuster was talking about public-private partnerships, but also saying, I think, kind of a message to the Freedom Caucus, it's not a silver bullet. We are going to need. Where do you think the role should be with the federal government and public-private partnerships? Which should take the lead?
PPPs are a successful model of delivering infrastructure, and Canadians, we have a good expertise in that. There are close to 200 projects currently being funded through P3s. But it is a one toolkit in many things that we need to do. There's no one solution. There's no one solution that fits all circumstances. What we are looking at, along with providing grant money, along with using P3s, is the creation of an entity called Canada Infrastructure Bank. And the role of the bank we see is to mobilize private capital to build infrastructure that is too risky for private sector to do so, and too expensive for public sector to do so. So how do we actually de-risk that some of the investment that private capital is willing to make, but too risky for them to take those chances. So we believe, and this is a very innovative approach on our part, and we feel that we'll be able to tap. For every dollar of public investments, maybe $3 to $4 of a capital investment.
Chairman Schuster indicated that all options are on the table, including possibly raising the gas tax. How does the gas tax play into Canada's? How is it funded in Canada?
Well, we have a federal gas tax that we have dedicated. Portion of that is dedicated to municipal sector.
Is it indexed?
It is indexed to inflation. And the money doesn't go down, actually, the way we structured it, that we do collect that money, but then we give that sustainable funding to municipalities, and then it continues to go up based on the inflation. So it's not really tied to the consumption. Local, provincial governments, they have their own taxing authorities that then they flow their money back to a municipal sector. But we also rely on our overall fiscal framework to provide grant money to our partners.
When you look internationally, what are other countries doing well that Canada and the United States could mimic but haven't done yet?
We always hear about Australia, about their model of tapping into private sector to free up governmental resources to focus on more social infrastructure where private sector may not have a role to play. But I think from our perspective, from Canadian perspective, venturing on our own path. We feel that there's enough local knowledge. I'm not saying that we're not going to rely. We do rely on international expertise. We had a very good engagement with the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. The last time I came here in June, we engaged with those two entities, along with learning from your experience on particularly on Smart Cities Challenge that your institutions have been successful on. But I think learning from all those, but crafting our own plan that fits the local needs. One thing that I firmly believe in, and our government believes in, is the local decision making. The federal government is very big, but sometimes disconnected from the day-to-day realities of people. And those day-to-day realities are actually felt by the local governments, local elected officials. So we believe they're in a better position to make those local decisions, and the role of the federal government is to come in and support those decisions and give them the right kind of support they need. So that ties into another thing that I want to share with you that we are doing differently. What has not been done in the past is to build the capacity of the local governments to manage their assets better. So asset management plans, and also give them the support to do some long-term planning for the major infrastructure projects that they want to build. So giving them support for design, giving them support for more engineering work that they need to do, which actually ties into the life cycle cost of the infrastructure that they need to build.
How important is rail and metro lines? Like in DC, metro is struggling, to say the least. And that's actually led to more traffic. Because the other day I was on the metro, and it should be a half an hour ride. It was an hour ride, and I barely made this meeting. And then I looked around on the train, and I realized very few people were on it because they don't have confidence in it. So how important is that to have very reliable rail projects?
Hey, you would know this, right? But before getting into municipal politics, I was a bus driver, right? And I worked for transit, public transportation system, almost 15 years.
Oh, wow.
So I understand how important, efficient, reliable public transit is, not only on the sustainability, environmental sustainability, but also productivity. As you said, if you miss your bus, you miss your train, you're half an hour late. That's a direct loss to you and to the economy. So it's very critical for the economic success. So having an efficient public transit system is very important to us. And our government has committed $25 billion over the next 10 years to support our local governments to build their metro lines, their LRT lines, and efficient public transit system. So it is very important for us.
Where do you see the future of transportation? The chairman was talking about autonomous vehicles, and we recently met with a company that's involved in that. And it just seems like over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, we're going to see a revolution that's going to change how we get to work and how we, that maybe my son or my daughter won't need a car. And that would help the environment. And the repercussions of that are significant whether you're dealing with the social aspects of drunk driving or other aspects of life. That where do you see this revolution going, and how soon will it be here?
Well, I don't think I can predict the future. What I can say is that through our Smart Cities Challenge, we really focus on how do we empower our local urban centers to look at technology and use that technology to find solutions for current problems and the problems that we will face into the future. So that's where automation comes in, autonomous vehicles come in, and how do they fit into land use planning, how do they fit into overall transportation network. we believe that local communities, if you give them the right tools and if you give them the right resources, will be able to find solutions that may work, because every urban center is different. The layout is different, the transportation network is different, so solutions will be local. And the role of the federal government is to actually give them the proper support to find those solutions.
And how does Canada strike the balance of needing improved transportation, but also having parks and private property and that kind of thing? What is the guiding principle?
Well, I think one thing that we are doing is actually dedicating funding for different areas of investment. So public transit doesn't have to compete with affordable housing, for example, or for recreational, cultural infrastructure, or public transit doesn't have to compete against trade and transportation infrastructure. So we are investing in 5 areas: public transit, green infrastructure, which is water, wastewater, flood mitigation, adapting to climate change. Then we have social infrastructure, which is affordable housing, recreational, cultural infrastructure, early learning, childcare facilities. Then we have the trade and transportation. So each, and the rural and northern communities infrastructure. So each area has a specific amount of money identified, and that money is dedicated to those areas. So they don't have to actually compete with, where you're making choices whether we should invest in affordable housing or we should invest in public transportation. And I think the significant amount of money that we will be investing over the next decade will leverage municipal and provincial resources to be enough money to meet those needs.
We are also going to open up to questions as we approach the end here. The Canadian government announced, you mentioned the infrastructure bank. Can you describe the process of how it got to that point? Because you just made a big announcement, and this, in America, like Chairman Schuster saying, well, we're talking to everybody. What can the politicians learn from the process that you went through?
Well, I think we believe that politicians should make decisions based on evidence, and evidence suggests to us that despite our historic investments that we will make, and we will leverage those investments with the provincial and municipal sector, despite all those investments, there still remain a significant amount of infrastructure deficit in our communities. And there also lies, billions and billions of funds in pension funds that are not earning enough money because of the low interest rates. So we think there's alignment where private capital is looking for investments, and we need investments in the infrastructure. So why would we not try to bring both them together? And that is the role of the infrastructure, and that's why we are looking at whether you provide equity, the public dollars being used to de-risk some of those the projects, right? So I think we feel there's enough need for the bank to play a role to build necessary, but sometimes it's beyond the means of the public sector, but also too risky for the private sector to venture into. Yeah.
We're going to open it up to questions. I have one in the back, actually. I haven't gone to the back yet.
I'm Art Gazzetti. I'm with the American Public Transportation Association. Thank you for your comments about public transportation. I'm very interested in how you're doing things in Canada. There's so much success. You put public-private partnerships in their context, but yet there are a lot of public-private partnerships for transit specifically. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on how they work. You need a revenue stream in order to pay back the private investors. Transit doesn't always have that, as such, without some kind of dedicated source. I don't want to get too technical, but I just want to ask how your overall transit investment strategy is working.
Well, as I said earlier, I served on City Council for 3 terms, and one of the largest projects that I worked on was the public transit project in my city, which happened to be a public-private partnership. the structure that we put in place was availability payments, where private sector invests a share, and they make the then municipality is making those scheduled payments to the private sector. I don't think there's enough money in a way that you can build public transit system solely with the private sector. There's not significant revenue attached to it. It's a user fee. People pay the fare, but it's not enough to recover the whole cost. But that's only one model. I think there's so many other ways that you can engage private sector, and every situation is going to be unique, and the financial arrangement is going to be unique to according to those local circumstances.
Right there.
Hi, good morning. My name's Catherine Simons. I work for an Alaska Native company called UIC. I had a question, Minister. You said that local communities need more support, and I'm curious, in this country that often means money. Is that what you mean, or if you mean more, could you expand, please? Thanks.
I think money always helps, right? When you look at the way the Canadian governments are structured, out of every tax dollar that I pay as a Canadian, only 10 cents are collected by the local government, and 65 cents are collected by the federal government. So there's an imbalance. So that's why federal transfers are important for local governments. Another is capacity. I think local governments, because of a limited amount of resources they have, they always struggle whether to put money filling potholes, which are immediate and bothers people. The most calls that a municipal councillor gets are about potholes and traffic congestion and their garbage not being picked up on time. So there's less resources available, kind of visionary long-term planning. So if federal government can come in and provide that support where they don't have to make those tough choices, and we can give them the resources to do that long-term planning. I think the capacity building and then providing the grants to build on their long-term planning. I think it's both ways.
Yeah, John Wetmore with pedestrians.org. In September, the Walk 21 International Pedestrian Conference is meeting in Calgary. Do you plan to speak at that conference, or are you going to be supporting it in other ways?
We always like to support local initiatives. Sustainable modes of transportation is going to fit into our green infrastructure, providing sustainable funding, and again, choices at the local level. Send us the invite, and if you can, we will definitely love to come and participate. And Calgary is my neighboring city. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta. Calgary is next to it, 3 years. So we have a rivalry going on. I mean, with some competition going on, but that's fine.
And one more in the back.
Ellen Ferguson, CQ Roll Call. I see on your schedule that you're going to be visiting Capitol Hill and talking to lawmakers. What are you going to be talking to them about? And second, there's a lot of anticipation of the start, kickoff of NAFTA talks, renegotiations. Would that at all affect your portfolio?
Well, one thing that the purpose of my visit is to find alignments on the infrastructure file, where both countries can work together and learn from each other. So that's why I'll be reaching out to other your policymakers here, but also to convey to all of you that Canada and the United States are two closest allies on many areas. Our economies are integrated. Millions and millions of jobs are dependent on trade with both of our nations. So free flow of that trade is very important. Also here to talk about one of the largest infrastructure projects that we have undertaken is the building of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, connection between Detroit and Windsor on our end, where close to $100 billion worth of trade each year flows between two countries. And also talk about our cultural ties, our a relationship that I talked about. There's so much that we can take pride in, and sometimes we take for granted. I think we need to continue to remind ourselves that that success of one country is so much dependent on the success of the other country, and that's the message that we are here to deliver, and we can learn from each other so much to even improve upon that. We have a shared goal. President Trump talked about creating jobs, and those people who have not felt part of the economy, how do you include them into the economy? And Prime Minister Trudeau has talked about a similar ideas about strengthening our middle class and those who are working so hard to be part of the middle class, how they feel that are they given the right opportunity to succeed. I think there's commonalities that we have that we can that we can build upon, and that's exactly our message has been, and that's exactly what we want to build upon.
We've run out of time. Please thank Minister Sohi. Thanks you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.